Professor Thane adjusted his collar nervously as he walked through the corridors of the Galactic Educational Institute on Proxima Station. The human exchange program had been his idea, and after months of bureaucratic wrangling, he'd finally convinced the Zephyrian Academy Council to allow a human instructor to teach their advanced xenobiology course. "Are you certain about this, Professor?" asked Dr. Kelrix, his serpentine colleague whose scales shimmered with anxiety. "The humans' methods are unconventional." Thane paused outside Laboratory 7, where muffled sounds of excitement could be heard through the reinforced walls. "Marcus Chen has credentials that speak for themselves. 3 PhDs in xenobiology, comparative anatomy, and behavioral psychology. He's handled creatures that would make our security teams flee in terror." "That's precisely what concerns me," Kelrix hissed softly. "Humans have this disturbing tendency to treat deadly predators as pets." Through the observation window, they could see Marcus setting up his equipment. The human was unremarkable by most standards. Average height, lean build, dark hair peppered with gray at the temples. But there was something in his movements, a fluid confidence that made even the Zephyrian students keep a respectful distance. "Students, please take your seats," Marcus called out, his voice carrying easily across the laboratory. The mixed class of Zephyrians, Quillians, and a few brave Centaurians settled into their hover seats, their various appendages and sensory organs focused intently on the human instructor. "Today, we're going to discuss apex predator behavior and the psychological mechanisms that govern dominance hierarchies," Marcus began, activating the holographic display. Images of various galactic predators filled the air: shadow stalkers from Kepler 442b, the massive void serpents of the asteroid belts, and the infamous razor maws of the Vega system. "But first," Marcus smiled, and several students visibly tensed, "I want you to meet someone." He moved toward a large, seemingly empty containment unit in the corner of the lab. As he approached, a low rumble emanated from within, a sound that made every non-human in the room instinctively step backward. "Professor Chen," called out Zix, a young Zephyrian whose crest feathers had gone completely flat against his skull. "What exactly is in that containment unit?" Marcus's grin widened. "A Vorthan Death Stalker. Adult male, approximately 400 kilograms, captured from the wild 3 months ago." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Professor Thane, watching from the observation deck, felt his primary heart skip a beat. "Sir," ventured Korth, a Quillian whose normally vibrant skin had turned a pale blue, "Deathstalkers are classified as Alpha-class extinction threats. They're banned from all civilian facilities." "That's correct," Marcus nodded, apparently unconcerned by the growing panic in his classroom. "They're also the perfect example of what we're studying today. The Vorthan Death Stalker represents millions of years of evolutionary perfection, a creature designed by nature to be the ultimate predator." He began entering commands into the containment unit's control panel. Several students made for the exits, but Marcus's calm voice stopped them. "Please remain seated. We're going to observe, not interact. The containment field is military grade, designed to hold creatures twice this size." The unit began to hum with power, and gradually, the occupant became visible through the now transparent aluminum walls. The Vorthan Death Stalker was a nightmare made flesh. Standing nearly 2 meters at the shoulder, its obsidian hide was covered in natural armor plating that shifted and moved like liquid metal. 6 legs, each ending in retractable claws the size of combat knives, carried its massive frame with surprising grace. But it was the head that truly inspired terror, elongated like a crocodile's, filled with rows of serrated teeth, and equipped with 4 eyes that could track independently. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Marcus said, seemingly oblivious to the fact that half his students were now pressed against the far wall. The creature moved within its prison like caged lightning, every step calculated, every movement speaking of barely contained violence. Its 4 eyes constantly scanned the room, cataloging threats, marking targets. "Note the hunting behavior," Marcus continued, pointing at the display screen showing the creature's vital signs. "Heart rate, steady. Stress hormones, minimal. This isn't fear or agitation, this is assessment. It's studying all of you, determining pack hierarchy, identifying the weak. Zix raised a trembling hand. Professor, how do you know so much about their behavior? Because I've lived with them, Marcus replied matter-of-factly. Spent 6 months in the wild observing a pack on Vorthos Prime. Fascinating creatures, really. Highly intelligent, complex social structures, and contrary to popular belief, not mindlessly aggressive. The Death Stalker suddenly stopped its pacing. All 4 eyes locked onto Marcus through the containment field. The creature's massive head tilted slightly, studying the human with what could only be described as curiosity. It recognizes me, Marcus said softly, and for the first time since the lesson began, his confident demeanor showed a crack. We've met before. Professor Thane's voice crackled through the intercom from the observation deck. Marcus, perhaps we should conclude today's lesson. Nonsense, Marcus waved dismissively. This is the perfect opportunity to demonstrate interspecies communication and dominance recognition. He approached the containment unit, coming within arm's reach of the transparent barrier. The Death Stalker pressed its massive form against the wall, breathing heavily enough to fog the surface. You see, Marcus explained to his terrified students, despite their reputation, Death Stalkers are not chaos predators. They follow rules, hierarchies. They respect strength, but more importantly, they respect fearlessness. The creature's breathing pattern changed, becoming slower, more deliberate. Its 4 eyes remained fixed on Marcus, but the aggressive tension in its posture seemed to ease slightly. The key to understanding any apex predator, Marcus continued, his voice taking on an almost hypnotic quality, is to recognize that they are not evil. They are not malicious. They are simply perfect at what they do. As if responding to his words, the Death Stalker performed what could only be described as a bow, lowering its massive head until it nearly touched the floor of its containment unit. Several students gasped audibly. Extraordinary, breathed Dr. Kelricks over the intercom. In 40 years of xenobiology, I've never seen documented behavior like this. Marcus smiled, placing his palm against the barrier. The Death Stalker immediately pressed its snout against the same spot, separated by mere centimeters of transparent aluminum. What you're witnessing, Marcus said, is recognition between apex predators. The demonstration might have continued without incident if not for the cascade failure that began in the station's power grid at exactly 14:27 Galactic Standard Time. It started as a minor fluctuation, the kind that usually passed unnoticed. But Proxima Station was old, its systems patched and repatched over decades of use. When the main fusion reactor experienced a brief oscillation, it sent a power surge through the secondary systems. In Laboratory 7, the lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. Marcus frowned, glancing at the containment unit's status display. Several amber warning lights had appeared, but the primary systems showed green. As I was saying, he continued, the Death Stalker's hunting methodology relies on. The lights went out completely. Emergency power kicked in a second later, bathing the laboratory in eerie red light. But in that crucial second of darkness, something had changed. The containment unit was offline. Everyone remain calm, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the rising panic. Emergency protocols are in effect. The backup containment field should be. A sound like tearing metal filled the air as 400 kilograms of apex predator punched through the deactivated barrier. The Vorthan Death Stalker emerged from its prison with fluid grace, its claws clicking against the laboratory floor. In the red emergency lighting, it looked like something that had crawled out of the deepest pits of hell. Chaos erupted. Students scrambled for the exits, their various species' panic responses creating a cacophony of shrieks, clicks, and warbles. Chairs overturned, equipment crashed to the floor, and the acrid smell of fear pheromones filled the air. But the Death Stalker wasn't focused on the fleeing students. It was looking at Marcus. The human stood perfectly still in the center of the laboratory, surrounded by overturned furniture and scattered equipment. The creature approached slowly, each step deliberate and measured. His 4 eyes never left Marcus's face. Sir, Zix called from the doorway, having turned back when he realized his professor wasn't following. "The emergency crews are coming. You need to get out of there. No sudden movements," Marcus said quietly, his voice somehow carrying across the chaos. "Nobody do anything to startle it." The Death Stalker was now less than 3 meters away. This close, Marcus could see the intricate patterns in its armor plating, the intelligence burning in its alien eyes. This wasn't just a mindless killing machine. This was a creature that remembered him, recognized him, had unfinished business with him. "Easy, friend," Marcus whispered, his hands slowly rising to show he was unarmed. "We meet again." The creature tilted its massive head, a gesture that was almost questioning. From the observation deck, Professor Thane watched in horrified fascination as his human colleague faced down one of the galaxy's most feared predators with nothing but calm words and steady nerves. "Security teams. Where are my security teams?" Thane demanded. They're maintaining perimeter," came the shaky response from the station commander. "Standard protocol for Alpha-class containment breaches. They won't enter until they're certain the creature is neutralized." "You mean they won't enter while it's still alive?" Thane translated grimly. On the laboratory floor, the Death Stalker had closed to within touching distance of Marcus. The human could feel the creature's breath, hot and fetid, washing over him. One swipe of those massive claws would end everything. Instead, something impossible happened. The Vorthan Death Stalker lowered its head and lay down at Marcus's feet. The laboratory fell silent except for the hum of emergency power systems. Students who had been fleeing stopped in the doorways, too shocked to continue running. On the observation deck, Professor Thane felt his legs go weak. "Impossible," Dr. Kelrix whispered. "The behavioral profiles, the aggression indices. This shouldn't be possible." But Marcus wasn't surprised. If anything, he looked relieved. "Hello, Scar," he said softly, reaching out to touch the creature's armored head. "I wondered if you'd remember me." The Death Stalker, Scar, apparently, made a sound unlike anything in the xenobiological databases. Not quite a purr, not quite a growl, but something that vibrated through the floor and seemed to resonate in the bones of everyone present. "Scar." Zix ventured from the doorway. "Sir, you named it?" Marcus smiled, his hand now resting comfortably on the creature's massive skull. "I didn't name him. He earned the name." He pointed to a long, pale mark that ran across the left side of Scar's head, visible even against the dark armor plating. "That's from our first meeting 6 months ago on Vorthos Prime." The story began to unfold as Marcus spoke, his voice calm and steady despite the unprecedented situation. "I was part of a research expedition studying pack behavior," he explained. "We'd been observing from a distance for weeks when our equipment failed. Storm damage. We were stranded in Death Stalker territory with no way to call for help." Scar shifted slightly, settling more comfortably on the laboratory floor, but his 4 eyes remained alert and watchful. "The pack found us on the 3rd day, 12 adults, led by this one." Marcus gestured to the creature at his feet. "They had us surrounded, completely at their mercy. My colleagues, they didn't make it." An uncomfortable silence fell over the laboratory. Even the students who had fled were now crowding back into the room, drawn by the incredible scene playing out before them. But Scar here, he was different, curious. While the others were focused on hunting, he was studying, watching, learning. "And when I stood my ground instead of running," Marcus paused, lost in the memory. "Something changed. Recognition passed between us. Predator to predator." "You're saying it spared you because it recognized you as an equal?" Professor Thane's voice carried clearly from the observation deck. "More than that," Marcus replied. "We fought." The admission sent a ripple of shock through the room. Fighting a Vorthan Death Stalker was considered tantamount to suicide. "Not to the death," Marcus clarified quickly. "It was a test, proving. He came at me with everything he had, and I gave as good as I got. That scar on his head? That's from a piece of debris I used as a weapon. But look here." Marcus rolled up his sleeve, revealing a set of parallel scars running from his wrist to his elbow. He marked me too. Scar's head lifted slightly at the sight of the scars, and that strange sound rumbled from his throat again. After that, everything changed. The pack accepted me, protected me. I lived with them for 3 months before the rescue ship arrived. And when I left, Marcus's voice grew softer. He followed, all the way to the extraction point, watched my ship leave orbit. Dr. Kelrick spoke into his recording device. Unprecedented behavioral documentation. Human subject establishes pack bond with alpha-class predator through ritual combat. Implications for interspecies communication protocols are staggering. But their moment of scientific revelation was interrupted by the sound of heavy footsteps in the corridor. The security teams had finally arrived. Attention in Laboratory 7. A mechanical voice announced. This is Commander Vex of Station Security. We are prepared to neutralize the escaped creature. All personnel evacuate immediately. Marcus's expression hardened. No, he said firmly. Nobody's neutralizing anything. He stood slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements that might startle Scar. The massive predator rose with him, moving with that fluid grace that marked him as a perfect killing machine. Marcus, Professor Thane called urgently. The security teams have authorization. If that creature shows any signs of aggression— He's not aggressive, Marcus interrupted. He's protective. As if to prove his point, Scar moved to position himself between Marcus and the laboratory entrance, his 4 eyes fixed on the doorway where armed security personnel were beginning to appear. Stand down, human, Commander Vex's amplified voice ordered. Step away from the creature and evacuate immediately. Marcus looked at Scar, then at the security teams, then back at his students and colleagues. In that moment, he made a choice that would echo through galactic academic circles for years to come. No, he said simply. Commander Vex was a Kryptonian, nearly 3 meters of muscle and chitin, bred for war and trained for violence. He'd faced down pirates, terrorists, and rogue AIs without flinching. But the sight of a human calmly refusing to step away from a Vorthan Death Stalker gave him pause. Human? Vex growled, his weapon charging with an ominous whine. You have 10 seconds to comply before I consider you a hostile. Then you'd better reconsider your definition of hostile, Marcus replied, his hand still resting on Scar's armored head. Because I'm not moving, and neither is he. The standoff stretched taut. Security teams had taken positions throughout the laboratory, their weapons trained on the massive predator. Students huddled in doorways, torn between terror and fascination. On the observation deck, Professor Thane found himself holding his breath. Sir, Zix called out suddenly, his young voice cutting through the tension. The vital signs on your display. Look at them. All eyes turned to the monitoring equipment that Marcus had been using for his demonstration. Scar's biometric readings were clearly visible. Heart rate steady, stress hormones minimal, brain activity patterns showing high-level cognitive function rather than aggressive arousal. He's not in hunting mode, Marcus said, vindication clear in his voice. He's in protection mode. There's a difference. Commander Vex studied the readings, his military-trained mind processing the implications. Explain. Vorthan Death Stalkers are pack hunters, Marcus said, his voice taking on the tone of a lecture despite the surreal circumstances. They have complex social hierarchies, strong loyalty bonds, and highly developed concepts of territory and family. Scar here isn't seeing this room as a hunting ground. He's seeing it as a place where his pack member is being threatened. Pack member. Vex's mandibles clicked in what might have been surprise. Me, Marcus confirmed. 6 months ago, I was accepted into his pack. From his perspective, we're family. Scar's 4 eyes tracked between Marcus and the armed security teams, his massive body coiled with potential energy. But there was something unmistakably protective in his posture, the way he kept himself between Marcus and perceived threats, the alert but non-aggressive stance, the way he remained still despite having the capability to tear through the entire security team in seconds. This is unprecedented, Dr. Kelrix whispered into his communicator. We're witnessing the first documented case of stable interspecies pack bonding between a human and an alpha-class predator. Professor Thane suddenly stepped forward. Commander Vex, I'm invoking academic sanctuary protocols. This creature is not a threat. It's a research subject engaged in peaceful contact. Academic sanctuary? Vex's weapon lowered slightly. You're claiming scientific protection for a Death Stalker? I'm claiming scientific protection for a groundbreaking discovery, Thane corrected. What we're seeing here could revolutionize our understanding of interspecies communication and predator psychology. Marcus felt Scar's tension ease slightly as the weapons lowered. The creature's breathing deepened, and that strange rumbling sound returned. Contentment mixed with vigilance. You realize, Commander Vex said slowly, that if this creature shows even a hint of aggressive behavior toward station personnel, I'll have no choice but to neutralize it? Understood, Marcus nodded. But you need to understand something too. Scar here is probably the safest creature on this station. Death Stalkers don't kill without reason. They're not mindless monsters. They're intelligent predators with their own code of honor. As if to prove his point, Scar slowly approached one of the younger security officers, a nervous Quillian who'd been shaking so hard his weapon sights were useless. Instead of attacking, the massive predator lowered his head and performed that same submissive bow he'd shown Marcus earlier. The young officer nearly fainted. Incredible, breathed Professor Thane. He's acknowledging the pack hierarchy, showing non-aggression to the subordinate members. Over the following hours, as the immediate crisis passed and academic protocols took over, something remarkable happened. Scar began interacting with the students and faculty, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. He demonstrated hunting techniques without violence, showed how Death Stalkers communicated through scent and posture, and even allowed some of the braver students to take tissue samples for analysis. The implications, Dr. Kelrix mused as he watched a group of Zephyrian students measuring Scar's claws with the creature's patient cooperation, are staggering. If humans can form pack bonds with alpha-class predators, they can form bonds with anything, Marcus finished. That's what makes us unique in the galaxy. We don't just survive, we adapt. We connect. We turn enemies into allies, predators into protectors. By the end of the day, Scar had become the most famous research subject in galactic academic history. Xenobiologists from across the galaxy were requesting observation time. The Galactic Educational Institute was flooded with applications from researchers wanting to study interspecies bonding. But perhaps most remarkably, Scar himself seemed to understand his new role. When Professor Thane tentatively asked Marcus if the creature might be willing to participate in ongoing studies, Scar looked directly at the Zephyrian academic and performed that distinctive bow of acknowledgement. I think, Marcus said with a grin, he's decided he likes teaching. As the artificial day cycle dimmed on Proxima Station, Marcus sat in the newly redesigned Laboratory 7, now officially designated as the Interspecies Communication Research Center. Scar lay beside him, for eyes half-closed in contentment, while holographic displays showed data streams from around the galaxy. The story of the human who faced down a Death Stalker and made it lie down at his feet had already become legend. But more importantly, it had opened doors that nobody had even known existed. Humanity's greatest strength, it turned out, wasn't their technology or their weapons or their expansion across the stars. It was their ability to look at the most feared predator in the galaxy and see not a monster, but a friend waiting to be made. And in a galaxy full of wonders and terrors, perhaps that was the most human trait of all.